everyone. Welcome to Dive in the Podcast, your favorite podcast about all types of diving, scuba, tech, freediving, and more. We cover it all. Every week on Monday, we'll post new episodes filled with diving news, interesting dive topics, environmentalism, and much more. This week, we're talking about dive gear, specifically what's in each of our hosts' personal gear bags, what we like, what we want to upgrade, an important piece of safety gear, and the mythical wildcard piece of gear. In a moment, we'll have some diving news out of Australia, and coming up later in the show, we'll hear some diving history. We'll get a reading recommendation, have a word on dive safety, learn who we should follow on social media. Before I get too far ahead of myself, let me introduce everybody. April, how you doing today?
Hey guys, I'm doing good. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. Mr. Fisher, Nick Fisher, how are you?
Doing great. Still at home. Still quarantining, but doing all right.
Still at home. That's good. That's good for everybody. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nick, the other Nick Winkler. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. Back here at it again. How are you doing, Justin?
I am fantastic. I just spent 2 hours dealing with some very grumpy children, so it's been really, really nice. But this podcast will allow me to, unwind for a while and relax.
You know what's new in my world, Justin?
What's new in your world, April? You've been threatening people with your SMB?
Well, I can't even do it, Justin. I can't talk.
This is going to be a long podcast, guys.
I'm sorry. I bought my dog a life jacket today. Kind of like an SMB, but for a dog.
It's more like a BCD for a dog.
But we can't go anywhere. You just in case it rains a lot in the neighborhood.
It's for the storm coming tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All right. So you can see where he is in the snow. Follow the orange dot across your lawn.
Nick's losing it.
Yep, that's right.
Well, we should probably get a little bit into some news here. Obviously, tourism has taken a hit because nobody's traveling right now. So there is a bit of an unintended consequence. And I'm not talking about friend of the show, Mags, sitting on a multi-million-dollar yacht on permanent vacation. I'm talking about the fact that there's tons of dive boats not really doing anything right now. There's one in particular, the Passions of Paradise. The dive operator Passions of Paradise in Cairns, an Australian city in northern Queensland. They normally dive on the Great Barrier Reef, so they can't dive right now. So the family-owned company has donated a state-of-the-art catamaran called the Passions 3 with some fuel and a crew to take scientists out to Hastings Reef to bolster the Coral Nurture Program. The Coral Nurture Program aims to give operators another stewardship activity that they can do at their local reef sites. They use found fragments, which are naturally broken off pieces of coral. They attach these fragments to frames located around the reef to grow in a bit of a coral nursery. These frags would likely die off if they were left in the sand, but clipped to the stands, they grow. Once they've grown out a bit, they return to the reef, and then they continue as an additional source of new corals for the reef. The initial 12-month project finishes next month. However, the operators can continue to operate the nurseries and plant corals, as well as expand to other sites. About 1,000 pieces of coral have been planted on the site called Hastings Reef in Cairns. You guys ever heard of something like this before?
There are a number of these coral regrowth programs around the Caribbean. Isn't that's correct, isn't it, Nick? You know more about that area than I do, yeah?
Yeah, I think their success kind of varies a little bit, and that's kind of why sometimes I'm not always sure how good they end up being. I've seen a couple of projects where a lot of resources go in for very little result, and often healthy coral that is grown in nurseries usually transplanted on a reef that is unhealthy and is still having issues. So you're transplanting good coral into a bad environment, and that usually just kills off that coral. So, I mean, it can be done, but it really has to be done properly.
That's an interesting point I didn't think about.
I mean, otherwise it just becomes a bit of a PR exercise.
Yeah, it kind of seems like if the issue with the coral not taking is the water temperature, it's causing the bleaching and it's causing the coral to die, then just throwing healthy plants at just an unhealthy environment doesn't seem to be really fixing anything, does it?
Yeah, well, maybe you can then take, instead of putting it into the dead areas of the reef, you're putting it into the still vibrant areas of the reef. I don't know.
Well, it's not so much that. It's more that you're then putting it in an environment where you haven't really dealt with the underlying factors. So if you have coastal development and runoff and agricultural runoff and all those things, I mean, yeah, the idea is you want to transplant corals from a nursery into an unhealthy reef for that to regenerate, but you still have to address the underlying issues.
Right.
Yeah.
That's no, that makes sense. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I bet you guys have a favorite piece of dive gear and something you'd never dive without. If there's anything divers have when it comes to gear, it's opinions. We're going to take a few minutes and talk about the opinions of our favorite pieces of dive gear, what we want to upgrade next, the piece of safety gear that we think is very important, and lastly, the wild card piece of gear. Now, this can be anything else. It can fit into the previous categories. Maybe it doesn't. Whatever you want to make it, that's fine for this last bit of gear. So let's hear your picks. So April, you're up first. What's your favorite item?
I think my favorite item in my own dive kit would be my regulators. I have the Ziegel F8 regulators. First of all, I mean, I'm not a super techie kind of person. Mm-hmm. So when I was picking these regulators, honestly, I wasn't going into detail of everything that these regulators could do. The reason I bought them actually was I had some Marae's regs, and when I was diving in the winter, they would free flow. So I was really just looking for something with an environmental seal and that I could dive with in the winter.
Yeah.
A couple of the things that I really like about the F8 regulators. First of all, I got a color kit for it.
Fancy.
So I could make my regulators pink, which was really cool. They've never free flowed on me. Let me knock on some wood here. And they breathe really easily. They also have the adjustable knob on the side. And I found once I switched to the Ziegel regulators from my Marae's, my air consumption actually improved. So that would be my favorite, is my Ziegel regs.
Yep, I serviced a lot of those too, and they're really easy to service. They're a pretty solid piece of kit, so that's a good favorite. What do you think you're going to upgrade next?
My next upgrade is definitely my dive computer. Right now, I have a Sunto Gecko, which I bet a lot of you don't even know what that is. And if you do, then
you probably work in a dive shop.
My grandfather, yeah, exactly. My grandfather was, he retired from diving a few years ago. So when he was getting rid of all his dive gear, he basically let me go through his dive bag and pick out whatever I wanted. And the only thing I didn't have in my own dive kit was a dive computer, so I took his. The receipt was still in the box from 2002. And but you know what, it works. It's not fancy, but it gets the job done. But it definitely needs to be replaced. I definitely would want.
How many dives did he have on it?
Really not many. It was pretty much new. I think he probably had maybe 40 dives on it or something. Now it's got a lot more dives than that, but it works. It's working. Next, I think I want a Pteric or a Perdix. Definitely one of the two. I haven't fully decided. I know Justin has the Pteric and loves it.
I do.
The only reason I think Perdix would just be dry suit, maybe a bigger display might be nice. But definitely my next upgrade.
Nice. Is there any piece of safety gear you can't do without?
3 things I carry with me are 3 knives. I bring these knives with me.
That's a lot of knives.
I know. I carry 3 knives with me.
Damn.
Well, the famous Devon would say 3 is 2, 2 is 1, and 1 is none. So that's how you sell that.
Well, that's my logic. I mean, I keep them in different areas, so there's always a knife in reach, no matter where I am.
Is there a Marine SWAT team I don't know about?
Oh, God. I would like to see all 3 knives in one location.
I'm not just an instructor. Yep.
Cross your chest.
My favorite one is my Aqua Lung titanium one with the blunt tip on it. That's my favorite one. I have 2 Pro Blue ones, but they're both pretty rusty now. But I do carry 3 of them. My big Pro Blue one I have on my leg. But my titanium one I have on my BCD.
Where's your 3rd knife at?
Also on my BCD, just in a different location. One's on my cummerbund, one's on my shoulder strap.
Oh, okay. That's good. I mean, theoretically,
maybe a little overkill.
It might be a little overkill, but if you were in a situation you're like we're caught up or something, you might be able to reach one and not the other. So can't be too cautious. What about your wildcard piece of gear? What are you thinking?
Well, I was just gonna say, now that I have my Ranger BCD, I have enough D-rings that you need to clip all the accessories you possibly can off to it. So
right, it's always important to look like a Christmas tree while diving.
Exactly. So my wild card item, I said my hot pink mask, which I think I've become a little bit famous for. It's identifiable, so your buddies always know who you are when you have a hot pink mask on. When I got it, it was almost a little bit of a gag, like, oh wow, this mask is completely hot pink. That's kind of hilarious. I should buy it, and now it's the only thing I'll wear. I believe it is my trademark now. Is the pink
Seems
mask.
like colors coming back into scuba. Seemed like for a while everything was black. If it wasn't black, you're weren't gonna make it very long as a diver. But it seems like colors are kind of coming back into gear.
Well, that's what I think too. And when you go diving, everybody's in all black, and now people always know who I am. Like you look around when you're diving with the sea wolves, you don't know who anybody is. They're all black, but with that hot pink mask, you stand out.
Easily identifiable.
What mask is that?
It's the SEAC Touch.
SEAC Touch, the frameless mask.
Yes, and that was the other thing, is it was $80, and most frameless masks, you're looking at over $100. So for a frameless mask, it's fairly reasonably priced. And it's really comfortable and low profile. I don't think I could go back to having a frame mask. I think I'm always going to use frameless kind of from here on out.
I'm a huge fan of frameless masks as well. Well, thanks for all that, April. Mr. Winkler, what's your favorite item?
I get a feeling everybody's favorite item is going to be a Shearwater computer. So, well, technically, I carry 3 dive bags, depending on what I'm doing, if I'm free diving, scuba diving, or on my rebreathers. So the one thing that stands out in common to all of those is really one of my cameras and one of my housings. As most of my friends know, I'll probably always have a camera in hand when I'm diving. So that's going to be my favorite piece of gear.
Nice. Anything you're looking to upgrade?
Well, technically, I just recently upgraded to a dry suit, which I only got to use once before you can go diving anymore. But yeah. But underwater scooter, the Bonix Discovery RS made in Germany looks pretty sweet. For some exploration and also for freediving. I could see myself freediving on a scooter.
Do you know if they test that on the Nürburgring?
You lost me there.
Stupid car joke. All right. Every stupid car is tested on the Nürburgring in Germany. So how about
the underwater edition is for
that.
scooters?
Sorry. Maybe if there's any Top Gear fans out there, you'll be laughing right now. Everybody else just,
That went right over my head, I'm going to be honest.
That's all right.
The Dive-In Car podcast.
Anyway,
I love that.
How about some...
Drive-In. Drive-In, the podcast.
Drive-In the podcast.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Safety gear. What are you thinking about safety gear there?
Pretty much grew up, and most of my diving's been drift diving. So, and I've actually had a couple of accidents. I've been lost at sea once for several hours. So the Nautilus Lifeline GPS is a pretty standard piece of kit. I have the old model. It still has a VHF radio in it.
Right.
Usually I carry that with a submersible strobe, although it's really hard to find a good model that will last dive after dive after dive without actually leaking. And then along with drift diving, a reel and a DSMB, and actually knowing how to use those pieces of gear, not just being able to deploy a DSMB properly. You see a lot of people carry them, and then when they get to use them, it's just a big mess. So the whole thing goes floating to the surface if it's not pulling them up. But also, if you're going to carry a strobe or you're going to carry a marine radio, you should know how to use them. You should know when you can use them, and you should know their limitations as well.
There's really good points there. What about your wild card?
It's my 6mm 2-piece Helios wetsuit. It's got an open cell interior, smooth skin on the outside, and I can dive that in minus 22 when the water's 0 in the winter here, and I can stay about an hour in the water. So yeah, probably my favorite piece of kit at the moment.
It comes with matching 6mm socks, because that's the important part.
Yeah. If you don't have the gloves and the socks, then the suit's pretty much useless.
That's a very nice suit. I've coveted it from a distance before.
It's pretty sweet, especially when it's custom made. It fits snug, and yeah, I mean, sorry, like depending. Sometimes you put it on and you get out of the water and you're still partly dry on the inside.
That is nice.
That's almost like semi-dry.
Very clever there. I see what you did there.
Those, if you haven't worn if you haven't worn an open, if you haven't worn a open cell freediving suit before, it's literally a second skin. So you can definitely come
they're a joy to put on, as you know.
Like most wetsuits.
Yeah. Have you put on let's talk about freediving suits for a second. Have you put on a freediving suit before?
Absolutely not.
They are brutal.
I'll be honest, I haven't worn a wetsuit thicker than a 5 mil for diving in Mexico. Any cold water diving that I've ever done has been all dry suit. I haven't even done 2P 7 mil, and I've been afraid to say that. Out of fear that I'd be forced into diving some awful 2P 7 mil wetsuit in winter in Nova Scotia.
Well, now you are.
Well, yeah, now
I'm
here
gonna
it
make
is
you.
that I've been outed. I've outed myself. So yeah, it's coming now. But nothing bigger than a 5 for me.
I wear my 7 mil in when I teach in the pool, so I've worn a 7 millimeter fairly recently. You should start wearing your 7 mil in the pool, Nick. It's nice. It's like teaching in a hot tub. It's an experience.
Teach students how to revive.
I'd recommend it
Nice right now.
Instructor tip of the day: teaching your 7 mil wetsuit.
April's Patty instructor tip of the day.
Yeah. Justin, add a cool sound effect here to make me sound more legit.
Editing note.
Got it. Here we go. Ready? April's tip of the day.
Wear a 7 mil in the pool. It's nice.
Can we make it like the Law and Order SVU?
Right. We'll edit.
Like dun dun. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Dun dun. All right. This is going to be really weird because it's already going to have happened, and now we're talking about maybe it will happen. So this going to be funny. We should probably move on to Nick Fisher's favorite item.
My favorite piece of kit is by far my Perdix dive computer. So I'll take this opportunity, maybe April, to talk you up on it a little bit if you're in between the Perdix and the Titanic. I'll give my reasons why I absolutely love my Perdix. It's been super easy to use. What kind of sold me on it was its ability to work really easily as an instructor and as, I guess newer diver. But I also wasn't limiting myself because I want to get into tech and I want to get into, deeper, longer dives. And I didn't want to settle for, a $200 computer when I would know I'd have to replace it down the road. So it's kind of a one-stop shop when you're thinking about dive computers. It's also, as a little added bonus, if people care about this sort of thing, it's made in Canada. It's made by, guys in Vancouver, or in BC rather. I'm not sure if they're actually manufacturing out of Vancouver, but out of BC. Mm-hmm. And, since they're Canadian, their customer service is unreal. A diver back home had his computer stolen. He later found it at a pawn shop, sent it back to Shearwater. They did a full diagnostic to see if it was, if they had broken or thrashed it around after it was stolen. They updated all the software on it, sent it back for no charge, and sent a little note that happy that you got your computer back from the guys at Shearwater. So been super happy with that as a computer, and I don't think I'll ever go to anything else. I've kind of spoiled myself.
Wow, that is awesome. What about upgrades? What are you looking to replace next?
My next upgrade is definitely going to be new dry gloves. So right now I have the Cytec Quick Connect, I believe they're called. Mm-hmm. Dry gloves. They've been awesome for a long time. I think I've just worn them out. So that it doesn't really connect anymore. I've stopped wearing liners in my gloves. I've stopped threading anything through my wrist seal because I know that they're going to leak. So there's no point in trying to get air into my hands or, wear anything underneath. So I've given up. I don't even know why I wear gloves anymore. But I do. So I'm definitely going to be upgrading to some Kubi dry gloves. And I've heard some great things about them and heard that they almost never leak. So that's a bonus.
I've never had dry gloves, so I can relate. I hope that's also on one of my upgrade lists.
Once you go dry glove, you never go back.
I know. I'm poor.
So, well, you know, such is the life of a student, I guess.
It happens.
Or a
Such
dive
is the
shop employee.
Both. I'm a student and a scuba instructor. I got the short end of the stick, both
It's a
like
double
both
whammy.
directions.
You're really out of luck. What about your pick for safety gear, Nick?
So I don't get lost at sea as much as Nick Winkler, so I don't have any good GPS systems that I'd recommend. But I've been really happy with my...
I recommend getting lost at sea at least once.
I mean, you know, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, but I mean, it's
character building.
I've been really happy with my regulators, which may not be your, classic piece of safety gear, but keeps you alive. And so I've been really happy. I kind of got the middle ground regulators but right below what April has. So I have the Onyx regulators from Ziegel. They're cold water. That's another thing that I'd like to upgrade at some point. Not as soon as my dry gloves, but also been really happy with them.
What about your wildcard piece of gear?
I was giving this a fair bit of thought, and I honestly have no idea. I really like my mask, which sounds kind of lame, but I have the Hollis M1. And have been super happy with it.
It's a quality mask.
Yeah, low profile, sits nice. It's what I can sell the most readily when I'm working in the shop. It's easy to sell what you own, but that's my choice.
We're a big fan of Hollis masks, I think.
Oh yeah, no. Hollis is a really great company for masks.
If they made it in pink, I'd get a Hollis
You'd be
mask.
all over it.
Email them. Maybe it'll
I
happen.
would. True, maybe they'll make me a special one. Can we send this to Hollis? Send this podcast?
Yeah, we'll try to get Nick Hollis on the podcast so we can have
That's what
Nicks.
we need.
Yes.
One more
Won't be
Nick
confusing
on the
at all.
podcast.
Nick Hollis, will you sponsor me?
And my pink mask.
Maybe. Did that sound desperate enough?
Somewhat.
We'll add some
it's all right.
sound effects in there.
All right. Maybe a small violin.
Sure, really. Hi everyone, I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsor, Torpedo Rays Scuba. Torpedo Rays is a local dive shop in Nova Scotia. If you're not in Nova Scotia, that's okay. They've got a wonderful website, torpedorays.com, TORPEDORAYS.com. All of the scuba gear you could ever need is there. If you can't find it, give Jason a call, 902-481-0444, and he'll be happy to help you out. And in these challenging times, it's always great to shop local. Don't go to a huge big box. Help support your local dive shop. Buy something you've had your eye on. Excellent time to make a good deal. Buy a gift certificate to use later. Whatever the case may be, Torpedo Rays and torpedorays.com will be there for you. Once again, their number is 902-481-0444 or torpedorays.com. So I guess lastly, it's up to me. My favorite item. Yeah, I'm glad nobody picked the Titanic, but we are apparently a big Shearwater crowd, that is for certain. Now, I got the Titanic because I also like to free dive, and it is the only model that has a free diving mode. Granted, the Perdix, I'm sure there's really no reason it couldn't have the free diving mode, other than it's just pretty big. So most free divers are kind of like low key on their stuff. I do like the form factor on it. The screen is honestly almost as big as the Perdix anyway. It's just the buttons that are a bit smaller. So I'm pretty happy with it. I like the wireless charging on it. It's compatible with two transmitters. Their app is fantastic. I've never had a dive computer that works so well with a logging app. So yes, those guys really put a lot.
Bluetooth works flawlessly. Like you just open the app and it's gone.
Yeah, Pelagic
it's going.
And, some of those other companies that make dive computers really need to look at what Shearwater does and mimic that. because it's night and day. And I'm going to upgrade. I have a Aqualung Fusion dry suit currently. It's pretty long in the tooth. It's actually so old. It's when it was Whites, before Whites got rid of the brand, or Aqualung got rid of the brand and called it Aqualung. So what I'm looking at is the Bear Sentry 2mm compressed neoprene dry suit. It's a stitchless suit, so it's all glued. It's got nice Yamamoto neoprene, lifetime warranty on the seams, and also like the other Nics, got to get those Kubi rings on that thing.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm looking at next. And
I feel left out.
You feel left out?
Grab some Kubis.
Now is a perfect time. Now is the perfect time to Kubi up and get yourself some dry gloves.
Kubi up.
Safety gear wise,
I don't have dry gloves, and my name's not Nick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I guess maybe you're just out of luck. Safety gear wise, I'm looking at the Easy Cut trilobite cutter. The thing literally cuts everything. It's just a fancy holder for a classic double-sided razor blade. It comes with extra blades. I've used it for unfouling a prop. I've never actually had to use it in a real life rescue situation, but I've cut pretty much everything with my trilobite, and it just saws through it. And if it ever doesn't, I just replace the razor blade if it gets a little rusty or something, and rips right through stuff. It's really nice. And it's small. I should say you can put that on literally any piece of webbing and it doesn't get in the way ever. So it's if you don't have one, you should look into it. My wildcard thing is definitely going to be my carbon fiber freediving fins.
Nice.
I got them on a closeout deal from Mares because they stopped producing the old model of not apnea fins, but their spearfishing fins, and the Razor line. And so they had some giant foot pocketed ones. Luckily, I have a giant foot, so I was able to get a extremely good deal on those fins. And man, they make such a difference. Like if you've ever swam through the water with fins on, sometimes you feel like you just can't move the speed you want to move underwater. With the carbon fiber freediving fins, I have to slow myself down. Otherwise, I can't keep up with the equalization. Yeah, like when I'm diving down, if I go as fast as I feel like I should be from years and years and years of scuba diving, I can't equalize. I'll just get caught up and I will fall behind. So, although I listened to a live event about equalizing the other day, and I've got some new tricks to try out when things warm up a little bit. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, Sheena had some good tips on there.
Yes, yeah.
If you're still looking for carbon fiber fins, Molchanovs has a new series out that Matt Duveau is using, I think, and they're now making custom foot pockets for like the bifin blades.
Oh, really?
Just like they do in monofins, so you can actually just have it measured right out to you, and it's fused into the blade. But they're pretty awesome fins.
Wow, yep. That is a pretty cool thing. I have to look into that.
Shopping list.
Yeah, put that on my upgrades list. Well, thank you everybody for your thoughts on your gear. There's definitely some great ideas there for people looking to round out their kit bag or maybe do some upgrades. It's always a good idea to think about your gear purchases so you're not stuck buying twice or being wasteful. And you know who else doesn't like to be wasteful? It's our co-host Nick, who has got a segment called Think Blue.
Right. So last week I introduced a segment called Think Blue, and this week I just kind of want to talk about what does it mean to think blue and why we should do that as divers. We think of the oceans as blue because they are blue. They're blue because the red color gets filtered out first in the top layers of the water column. We think of the oceans as blue because subconsciously we're aware of the first images of the Earth taken from space, that blue marble that we see with the moon in the foreground. It shows how blue the planet is, right? After all, it's 71% of the Earth's surface. So for me as a diver, to think blue is to think oceans. It's to think of the oceans as a special place, a place I connect with, to which I'm drawn, a place to which I return time and time again, to see, to explore, to experience. And it's really, especially in these times when we can't go outside, the memories that I've had in the ocean really stick with me. Because it's not something you can explain, right? You can talk about diving to somebody, but it's until somebody experiences it that they really understand what it's about. Like other divers, I'm attracted to the freedom, the weightlessness. I'm drawn to the rays of light, the feel of water as it envelopes you underwater, whether you're a scuba diver or free diver. You sense the density of the medium you're in. We're all awed by the creatures, large and small, rare and abundant. And the oceans leave an impression on us, right? So to think blue is to be conscious of the ocean. And that's the way I kind of want to think about it, is that we're conscious about it in all the aspects of our lives. As divers, we often venture into the coast and into the ocean, but how often do we stop to think about the oceans that we're actually exploring? How often do we make the connections between the actions that we have as divers and the implications that these might have on the ocean? It could be simple things, right? Like picking up ocean creatures when you're underwater when you're not supposed to be. On your way to the dive site, stopping for a coffee, but taking an unreusable cup, a disposable cup out instead of refilling. All these little things have actions. It could be something more complex about choosing, the outfit that you're going to travel with and what travel options you're going to use when you go somewhere. Are they going to be a responsible dive operator? As instructors, which we all are, we're the ones that are really ultimately introducing students to the underwater world, right? It's a fragile ecosystem. And the examples that we set and the knowledge that we bestow on our students, those are examples they're going to follow with them all the time. And often as instructors, we're kind of rushed for time because we're trying to get all the skills done. But do we as instructors stop to think and explain to students really what the implications of this new skill has, not just in terms of safety, but in terms of their responsibility? Just like hiking, leave no footprints behind, or leave only footprints behind, leave only bubbles behind kind of thing. As industry partners, dive shop owners, or whatever the case might be, it's questioning how your products get to you, how packaged they are. From experience, there's a lot of plastic that comes with some of the equipment that customers don't necessarily see. Or, if you're a dive shop operator, whether like retail or a tour operator, is really about what sustainable practices you're including in your operation. So our attitude as divers matter. So to think blue is to think about the oceans, and diving as being deeply connected to one another and our identity as divers, and not just a place that you go diving in. So from here on, we'll look at some specific topics in the next episodes moving forward.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see where this segment goes, because there's definitely a lot of intermingling, intertangled things there that a lot of people just kind of blow off and don't really think about.
Yeah, and hopefully we can bring some awareness and to things that people might not have thought of before.
Most definitely. Coming up next, we have a segment that will have a few different options over time, and we'll rotate through those options based on what's a best fit for that episode. We might chat about specific product reviews. We might look at some research and development going on. Might look at some dive site reviews or dive site history. And in fact, this week we'll be taking a look at a historic event. Tell us more, Nick.
So this week, on April 15th, 1912, was the date that the RMS Titanic sank. So not a particularly happy diving event, but one that I wanted to talk about, not necessarily because of the event itself, but 73 years later, when the wreck was rediscovered by Robert Ballard. He used deep sea sonar technology and some new ROV technology and made this major discovery of rediscovering the Titanic when it hadn't been found before that, which obviously brought a lot of attention with it. That the sinking of the Titanic was so sensationalized, and it was a huge tragedy. Being able to refine the Titanic, and that discovery was broadcast on TV afterwards. It's things like that I wanted to sort of talk about, that kind of ignite a bit of a want to discover in people, that the ocean is so vast. And, we know more about the observable universe than we will about our own oceans. And, one of the discovery like this surely brings out some desire to keep exploring in people. So I kind of wanted to open that up to you guys. But was there a particular event or a particular thing that kind of got you really committed to learning more about the ocean? Like what made you want to jump in on scuba when most people are very happy walking around on land when there's just an infinite supply of air?
Well, I mean, for me, I remember thinking of the Titanic stuff specifically. I remember like the James Cameron specials and some of that earlier stuff where where we saw that in HD and such, and that was probably a little later in my dive career. But those images from underwater were always pretty exciting to me.
I mean, to answer your question, like I grew up in the Caribbean, so small islands and spending a lot of time on the beach, and you have a mask and snorkel set, and you kind of start exploring. And at some point, I think I learned to dive halfway or early on through high school, as in scuba diving. So it just kind of evolved from there.
Did you find that your experience being so close to the ocean made you want to go in? I've heard from lots of, I'm not going to say lots, but I've heard from people that have grown up in the Caribbean or talking to people sort of on trips that have lived around the ocean, that they have no interest, that they've heard stories, they've seen things, they've seen the sharks, or they've heard the stories passed down, that the things that got you out of the ocean that kind of leave an impression that I'm never going in, which always surprised me. But I mean, I was from the prairies, so I guess that would surprise me.
I mean, maybe if you
was that impression ever there?
No, I mean, I think there's. I mean, I've known a lot of people that go like, yeah, I'm never getting close to the water, and I don't know where that comes from. But for me, it's just always been sort of to me, the ocean is kind of a natural extension to land for me. Like I just keep going, right?
I think for me, I mean, obviously, I grew up around the dive shop. I always watched my parents go diving. So there's definitely that factor. I grew up on the ocean. Ocean was my backyard, literally. Swimming in the ocean since I was a little kid and all that sort of thing. Interestingly enough, like my dad tried to teach me to dive when I turned 12, and I had no interest. Like I went in the pool with him once and I was like, nope, don't like this. He tried to get me to take my mask off underwater. I was like, nope, not doing it. And I didn't touch it again until I was 16. And when I turned 16, I kind of decided on my own that it was something I wanted to do. When I was in high school, I was a big athlete. Played soccer competitively. I played ringette competitively. And I also skied competitively. So when I got to grade 12 and all that kind of ended, it was like, okay, well, what's the next thing? So then I decided to take up diving. Even when I was in the pool at 16, I was like, oh, God, like, I don't know if this is for me. Like, and the second I got in the ocean, I was obsessed. And I was like, yep, nope, this is for me. I think it was just getting in the ocean and seeing, like, instantly I got in and I saw a lobster. And I was like, yep, this is cool. This is what I'm going to do. And ever since then, I've been hooked.
Well, thanks for everybody on that. And thanks, Nick, for that the history lesson there about the Titanic. Let's head back over to Nick Winkler for this week's book suggestion.
So kind of sticking with the theme of the Think Blue essay that I had out earlier. A really good book, if anyone's interested in the the natural or biological history of the oceans, is a book called The Unnatural History of the Sea by Callum Roberts. He's a professor of marine conservation at the University of York in the UK. And his book really recalls the days of explorers and exploration in a time when there might have been more fish than water, so to speak. And then it really weaves a tale of sequential exploitation and depletion of marine resources, from fish to other species, from one habitat to another, from one species to another, and just how humans kind of went around and just depleting things. And really to a point where we left nothing untouched in the ocean. It touches on some important milestone in our imposition of power over the oceans, or impression that we've imposed power over the oceans, because it was once laughably thought that the oceans were not inexhaustible, but that's proven not to be true. But Dr. Roberts' book doesn't really leave us in despair. He provides an outlook for an optimistic future, albeit with really a dwindling window of action for us to take. So even though Callum Roberts is an academic, his writing is actually really excellent. The book is really captivating. pretty much for any audience. It's really a book that's accessible to anyone. And I've actually heard him give us a lecture on the topic, and he's very eloquent, and I think it plays out in his writing. So if you're really looking for a good source on how humans have impacted the oceans, that's a great place to start. It's available in multiple formats, included as an ebook, so you don't have to wait on Amazon to deliver it. You can just kind of download it as soon as you want.
That's awesome. I might try to check that out and see if they've got an audiobook. I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm doing other stuff. We're going to head over now to April. April, you got a safety tip for us this week.
So my safety tip of the week is to always carry a DSMB with you. These are really handy, especially as we get out of isolation. We're really going to be in prime boating season. So a lot of people are going to be out on their boats that, weren't there in the winter. So even these dive sites that you went to where you didn't see any boats, there may be boats now. So when you are making your ascent, it's really good idea to deploy a DSMB before you do this. It's also a really good idea to practice using one. It's really easy to have an uncontrolled descent if you're not used to using these. So I would recommend you go out and you practice doing this in shallow water and just adjusting your buoyancy after you deploy it, or I guess really even while you're deploying it, to make sure you don't have an uncontrolled descent.
And you got some social media follow tips for us?
So you can follow us on Instagram. It's at divein.thepodcast, or like our Facebook page. You can also follow Justin on Instagram. He randomly decided to change his Instagram handle. So it's no longer at JSTNMLR. It's now I Dive OK, which I'm taking as in I dive okay, or it could be I dive okay. It's up to you. Take it however you wish.
I have my reasons.
You can also find Nick Winkler at Nick Winkler Photography, and you can find Nick Fisher at scuba_406. And of course, you can find myself at April Weichert. You can also give our store, who sponsors this lovely podcast, Torpedo Rays, a follow. It's just at Torpedo Rays. And our clubs. So there's Halifax Freediving Club, which is at Halifax Freediving Club, and the Sea Foxes, which is at SeaFoxes_.
Awesome. Thank you for getting that all in there, April. I want to thank everybody, all my co-hosts for today. April, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Justin. Thank you for having me on.
Mr. Fisher, thank you for being here.
Thanks again, Justin. Great to get to talk to you again.
Always a pleasure. Nicholas.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for staying tuned, and we'll see you next week.
You can find all the links for everything mentioned in the show notes or on our website, diveinthepodcast.podbean.com. We'll see you next Monday when we have a chance to speak to Jason Weichert of Torpedo Rays Scuba. This episode of Dive In the Podcast was brought to you by our sponsor, Torpedo Rays Scuba. Head over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated, and thanks for listening. Good night.